I have a recently started game publishing company. So I'm not a super experienced game publisher. And one reason why JT thought it would make sense for me to talk is that it's very relatable experience. It's fresh in my mind, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So that's what we're going to talk about. As before, please ask me questions along the way. I did get asked by someone who will remain nameless. I'm not going to make you do stuff this time. Okay, fine, it was Alicia. It was all Alicia. So I'm not going to make you do stuff, but you'll get the most out of it if you ask questions. So what is it like to launch a publishing company? The questions you should ask yourself if you're thinking about it, and the challenges you should expect. Of course, this is not a definitive list. It's my experience. Okay, I'm going to do he's been off the air for a while now, but a David Letterman countdown of the top 5 things I wish I had known before I started a game company, a game publishing company, which is different than if you start a company to own the designs of your game. Okay, I do want to make a distinction between the two. It's smart to have your game designs licensed in a company versus privately. There's a lot of value to that, and LLCs in most states cost $100 or $200 to start, and then they're free. This is for a game publishing company, and I publish other people's work, not just my own. So number 5, good custom art and graphic design for an entire game is expensive. I don't think people fully realize the cost that can go into art until they suddenly have to buy it. And we're not just talking, I see Alicia nodding because I know she does a lot of this stuff, that if you're wondering, go out to like ArtStation or DeviantArt and look for art that you really like, that's quality art. Or go to Instagram and find artists. It's a great place to find artists, and then they'll usually give a link back to where you can hire them for custom work. Quality art with an experienced designer or illustrator is not cheap, especially for an entire game. Like, for example, what if you want different art on every card and you have 20 cards? That's going to add up fast. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying be realistic about those expectations and figure out what you should do before or after, let's say, a Kickstarter. Because you can kickstart a game and you can have some of it done, and then you can use the Kickstarter money to pay for the rest afterwards. They won't know you don't have every single image, but they do need to see enough that they're engaged with the art. I'm going to give an example here. So I've mentioned to you on the last talk, I'm working on a steampunk airship game called Airsloop. And it took a while, but I found this absolutely amazing artist out of Hong Kong. And this was one of the ships. This ship, we were talking about Avatar earlier. This ship is a steampunk airship that's also got an organic feel. The idea was like the plants are growing up into it and a higher resolution. Like, it's got a little dandelion card up here, and it's a little Venus flytrap. I mean, it's amazing. And those were not all my ideas. A lot of it the artist brought to the table, which is another thing to keep in mind. When you're paying for a good artist, you're not just paying for the art, you're paying for their experience. You're paying for their ideas. I can't put a price on that, frankly. And if they're a known artist, like this is an artist, his name's James, no, it's NG, but it's pronounced no. He actually has a fan base in Asia for his steampunk art. So it's kind of nice because then he's happy to start sharing it with his fans. Number 4, things I wish I had known. Oh, the cost, is that coming up? Wait, sorry, it's like doing, sorry. The cost for an experienced attorney was easily 4 times my budget. And let me tell you some of the things you need good legal advice for. Because as the previous speaker mentioned, intellectual property. And that's a huge thing. It's about how do you file intellectual property for yourself. You can copyright rules of a game. You very rarely can trademark game mechanics. There's only been a couple. One of them is when you tap a card. Magic, thank you. There's a couple mechanics that have been successfully trademarked. Generally, mechanics cannot be trademarked. Generally, what's protected in a game is the rule book, the rules of the game, and then any art that goes with the game. Those are the pieces you can protect. You need to be sure you have legal documents that protect you, that when you hire someone to do work, and again, I know Alicia does work for hire for games. Not picking on you, Alicia. Maybe a little. That you want to make sure the contract you have is written to protect you. And personally, I don't want to use a random contract off the internet. I want to work with an attorney who, like I have an attorney I work with that is an intellectual property specialist, is based in my state, and has experience. In fact, she used to be the assistant attorney general in my state. So she knows her stuff. I want that because the value in what you're creating to protect it so other people can't use it it's a legal thing. It's intellectual property, and getting someone to help you do that, it's not cheap. The other piece that I didn't fully realize was you need contracts for, I knew I needed a contract with my designers, but then, okay, again, it's sitting down and figuring out what goes in it and all of those things. It all takes time, and guess what? Attorneys charge by the hour. So the legal stuff, which is easy to gloss over until you're in the hot seat, have a budget. And don't skimp on it, because there are lots of examples. And if you're interested, catch me later, because my attorney's also now a really good friend, which is nice. I still pay her. But I've heard tons of horror stories, because she specializes in intellectual property, of people who've lost out because they didn't protect themselves, or they used somebody's IP they didn't have the rights to. Things I wish I had known, number 3. This one, again, I cannot understate. Finding artists and designers with whom you can work effectively is a part-time job. Because how many of you have actually hired someone to do custom artwork for you for your games? Okay, I'm sure those of you who just raised your hand would agree with me in saying that you got to find someone that shares the style you want, but then it's almost like you need a Vulcan mind meld, which isn't easy to get. And being able to work with them and communicate to them what you want, and that they're willing to take feedback. This is a big issue I've seen when I've tried to contract with an artist, is they may be extremely talented and they may be able to execute beautifully. However, are they willing to have you tell them their baby's ugly? Because at the end of the day, you need to be the one who likes it. And if they're not willing to hear, no, I don't like that, or that's not what I had in mind, or whatever, then it's not going to work. And you're going to be unhappy with what you get. They also may just not listen. And I'm going to give you an example now. Because with this steampunk airship game, myself and the designer came up with there's 6 airships you could captain in this game. Okay, and we wanted each airship to have its own unique style and identity, and really make that part of the character of the game. So we had descriptions, and I did like a brief. I don't know would you call it that, Alicia? I did like a brief. So it gives the background of the game and then the specifics for that thing. Like, what are you looking for? Steampunk, blah, 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 blah. And so one of the airships was supposed to be steampunk. Again, steampunk. Everyone in this room know what steampunk is, or at least have some idea. Cogs, timepieces, goggles. Jules Verne, yeah, exactly. But I wanted it to have an organic flavor, like maybe some organic flavor. I showed you the one ship, which was amazing. Let me show you what I got when I was testing people out, and you're gonna have to pay them. Like, I've never asked an artist to work on spec, meaning I haven't asked someone, oh, you wanna work for me? Well, give me a free drawing. No. If someone's willing, I'm gonna pay them for their time to at least get a draft. And it can be a rough draft, but I don't think it's fair to an artist to expect them to work for free. So keep in mind, I said I want steampunk. That's what I got. I'm like, okay, it's interesting. And I actually ended up, because he gave me a a black and white line drawing. And I did pay him to do color because I do really like it, but it has nothing to do with steampunk, right? So he's a very talented artist. He did have steampunk in his portfolio in ArtStation, and that's what I got. So I wish as a designer or as a board game professional, publisher, someone had warned me in advance that finding artists you can work with, that can deliver, that answer your emails, all that stuff. It's like a part-time job. It really is. And then you have to make, and then I had one person who, then there was a whole debate about how I was even going to pay them. So lesson learned, now I tell them up front, I will pay you through PayPal. That's how I will pay you? Because I had someone like some weird thing or, I can't even remember the name of it. It was like some strange payment system. I'm like, no. One guy wanted, this guy, he's in Russia. He wanted me to pay him with cryptocurrency. And I'm like, dude, I know how to do that, but I'm not going to. Seriously, that was bizarre. Is everyone still awake? Okay, just checking. Things I wish I had known. Number 2, the need to manage designer expectations. So how many of you guys were in the morning session, the first one? Yeah, and they were talking about pitching to a game company. And I'm curious, how many of you know what the industry standard is for royalties? How many of you know? Okay. Anybody want to guess that doesn't already know? Now, because I know you know. So I'd like someone who doesn't know to just, what do you think it might be?
Like 10% or something?
Of what? Because that's important.
10% maybe of actual profit, not of sales, but of profit, which is something different than sales. So.
Okay, what do you want to guess?
0.5% of sales.
Okay.
I was at 5.
Okay. Okay, so a couple things. One is I would really strongly encourage you to never do a contract based on profit. They might try to get you to do it, but as a numbers person, you can totally play games with that. I mean, you don't want to have to be fighting over what's that number. The most common way I've seen, because I did a bunch of research before I made offers, is based on MSRP, a percentage of MSRP. And then the next most common is your wholesale price. What's your wholesale price? Now, of those, yes, 5%, it goes as low as 3% and up to, I've seen as high as 8% of MSRP. So it's not very high. And I've had the experience when I'm talking to people is they're like, oh, and they start running the numbers, right? So I say this because it was kind of a cold shower for people when I was talking to them about, okay, if you sold 1,000 games, let's say you sell 1,000 games, and it sells for $30 a pop, that's $30,000, and let's say you get 5% off that. How much is that?
1,500.
Pardon?
1,500.
Yes. What?
1,500.
Yeah, it's $1,500, so I had to think about it for a minute. But can you imagine someone saying, oh, you get $1,500 for thousands of games sold in all the hours of your work?
Yeah, 2.5 years of work.
2.5 years of work for that much money? And I'm not saying that to discourage you. I'm simply saying that the financials are, it's not as though me, the publisher, is making a killing off this game. Because all the manufacturing, hiring the artists, because generally publishers want to own the art. Or they'll want to buy it from you. Like, I want to own the artwork and the game. But I don't have to. One person I'm working with, they have art, and it's great art. And I'm like, all right, fine. You already paid for it. That's fine. We'll use it, because they have all that clear. Another thing would be what to expect. And this morning, some things I'm just going to build on from this morning. You know, people talked about, will you get a signing bonus, essentially, or advance? Probably not as a first time, and definitely very unlikely with a small publisher like me, you know, because I just don't have that in my budget, not right now. How involved will you be? It depends, and so yeah, what are your expectations to get out of this? And will I or another publisher, and they vary depending on the size. I can't give everything that a large publisher can. On the flip side, I can do things like work with someone personally, and the gentleman who designed Airsloop, who game designer, he's been actively involved in picking out the ships and the design, and I don't know, but it sounds like from what I've heard, you may not get that with a large publisher. So, but managing those expectations. I'm curious, and I'm not going to make you do it, Alicia, but I'm curious if anyone in here has found they've talked to a publisher and been surprised by what they've learned or the message they got. Like the publisher had to give you some bad news, so to speak. No one? Okay. Another thing would be, an idea is not a game. I don't think this room would do it, but I can't tell you once I started doing game design, like game publishing, how many of my friends were like, I have the best idea for a game. Okay, and? No, you should just pay me for the idea. No. So how developed does it need to be? For me, because I don't have a big company behind me, and again, this is about starting a small publishing company. Because I don't have a big company behind me, I need games that have already been play tested. I need a game. The first guy I signed, Dave Eng, he did the Airsloop game. He done tons of play testing. Like I obviously played the game, but he did I can tweak it, but it was basically a game that I could say, all right, we put a theme on it that works with the mechanics, as we talked about earlier, and it's good to go. I don't have the time and energy to do a bunch of play testing. Yes?
What is lots of play testing? How much?
Okay, that's a very fair question. I would say he's had over 100 play tests on his game, and more than half of those are with people who aren't his regular design game friends, right? More than half are with people like at a Protospiel or an Unpub or something else. It depends on the game. His game's even though it has a lot of strategy, it's pretty simple in rules. So the more complex the game is in rules, the more maybe balancing you have to do in the game, the more play tests you would need to do. Like an RPG system would need way more than 100 play tests. Something like his game, it's definitely enough.
So Mike, you come to one of these things, we play it all weekend, you take it back to your home group, they play it for months and months.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite ready to go to an unpub, but they talk to you, that might be enough.
It might be enough to talk to me, but you still need, I would want preferably to have at least one blind play test in place.
Okay.
Do you guys all know what a blind play test is? When you just hand them the rules in the game and walk away. Preferably don't even be standing there because they will look at you.
Yeah, I tried to do that once, it was terrible. Just don't be there.
And that's actually a codicil I wish I'd known was how hard it can be to find good playtesting places and people who will playtest and not the same people over and over because they get to know the game. And you do need fresh eyes on your game. So any other questions about what's enough or lots? Your mileage may vary. For me, some of it's, do I feel confident that it can't be easily broken? It's been stressed. The game has been stressed in different ways, and it delivers a good experience to the user, and it's highly replayable. So for me, for my company, what I'm looking for is something that's highly replayable, and this is, as a game publisher, you want to have, what are you? What do you do? I like working with new to the public game designers that they haven't published before, because I'm more than happy to work through that with them, that they're like family friendly. I have a 13-year-old. I want her to be able to play it. And maybe this goes without saying, but it has to be, there's no inappropriate content. There's nothing that's, pardon? Evil, yeah. I mean, just, it's something that you treat people well in it. Treat people well. Be a good person. So I won't take anything that doesn't follow that, and is very replayable, because I think part of selling a game to people, and this, you got to decide what your selling proposition as a publisher. It can't just be like, I make games. Okay, great. It doesn't help you be memorable. To me, having something be highly replayable, it's easy to argue when I put a game in front of someone, it's worth X dollars. This game is worth $50 because you can play it over and over and over again. That's an easy sell versus, well, you might play it twice. Okay, so manage designer expectations. Yes, Steve?
I was just wondering if I could sum it up. So you listed your publisher expectations to a designer.
Mm-hmm.
You have a certain character.
Yeah.
Lots of publishers have different characters.
Yes.
So the designer should be shopping around a little bit too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dave, I know really well because we're actually in a mastermind together, a game design mastermind. So we got to know each other and we knew we were a good fit personally. The second game that I've signed, she was referred to me through someone. So remember I talked about connectors? A connector connected us together. And she really hadn't shopped it yet. And I actually said to her, you know what? Go shop it first. I love this. I think this is great. I love it. I'd like to work with you. However, I want you to want me as much. I didn't want to just be because I was there and convenient.
I've heard of publishers directing people to other publishers because it's great, but we don't do this.
Or yeah, it's not your thing. Right. And so know what their thing is. If all they do is co-ops and you're giving them, you know, something that's like a war game, it's probably not going to go over. Okay. Number 1. Oops. This pick up and deliver game does not have a rule book, tax, checklist, or cheat sheets. Logistics. I mean, you pick up and deliver games. They're all about logistics. And everyone in this room now is probably very well aware of how logistics can break down. Even when you don't have, yeah, exactly. Even when you don't have a pandemic, though, logistics as a publisher are actually pretty complicated. And there's no one-stop shop to get all the info, right? I mean, as far as where are you going to produce it? And then it's just, think about it this way. When you get something, I used to have an import company, so I brought things into the US before, but just the fact of how is it going to get shipped? Who's putting it on the ship? Who's responsible for the ship? Getting it through customs. You know, I could keep going. Different countries have different requirements. You know, do you want it in different countries? Like with this artist I got for Airsloop, I want it in Asia because he's got a following in Asia. So there's all this pickup. I really think it's a pick up and deliver game, but it's almost like someone took the rule book, tore it up, and threw it away, and you're like, yes. Pardon? Hacks. Well, to me, a hack is something like, oh, this is a shortcut. You know, it's everyone knows this, but no one's told you. It's things like, what's a good example of there are hacks in the industry. And what I would say is one hack would be if you have like just a card game, and I don't mean that in a dismissive way, but if you have a card game, all you need is cards printed, right? Playing cards, standard poker size. The Game Crafter, as well as a couple other companies, are going to probably end up being as financially viable above a certain production amount as international, because you don't have to worry about logistics. And when you think about all this stuff, time is money, and all the things that are stuck. I actually worked, we talked about restoration games earlier. I worked their booth at Origins. And listening to them talk about with the Dark Tower and trying to get it to the US, it literally was a pick up and deliver game. It was like, okay, we sent it here, and then we had to get it on this ship and this and this. It's not straightforward in the best of times. But a hack would be, if you have some kind of game that might be manufactured here, don't just look at the dollar cost of the game, look at all the other pieces. The time it's going to take to ship. Will it get shipped in time? Which is a different question. Could it get stuck in the canal? What was the canal that got blocked? Thank you. Will it get stuck in a canal? That would be an example of a hack that everyone says make it in China may not be the answer for what you're doing. Does that help? Any other questions about my top things I wish I had known when I started? Yes.
Would you still do it again?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I love it. I mean, I'm a baby company. That's why JT asked me to speak. He's like, I want people to get, when you're first starting, relatively speaking, but I love doing it and I love helping. I know this is weird, but I like logistics. I like numbers. I like operations. So to me, it is a game in a fun way. And the first person, Dave, he's a friend of mine that I'm doing his game. He has this great game, but it won't get out if he doesn't have it signed. And it's so much fun to help a friend bring something to fruition. And to me, this new designer who I didn't know before, she's now my friend. I mean, to me, it's the what I can bring to the table and how I can help people. I love seeing people bring their dream out into the world. So yeah, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Other questions about mine? We got more stuff, but this is what would I wish I had known? Okay. If you're thinking about starting your own game publishing company, what should you ask yourself? You don't have to answer out loudly, Alicia. She's like, quit talking to me. Why do you want to do it? This might seem simple, but I'm surprised how many people, when I ask that question, they're like, I don't know, because people do it. Why do you want to start a game? What will you consider a success? This is really important because is it money? Is it units sold? Is it games published? What's success to you? Define that in advance because that's what you're going to strive for. Don't let other people define your success or happiness. Define it for yourself and have that up front. What would be a success? And that can change over time. Very important question. Where's the money coming from? Because we've talked about all the things that cost money. How are you going to pay for it? Yes, you can use Kickstarters. Absolutely. However, there's a chunk of money you will have to spend before you ever get to a Kickstarter. And to be realistic about spending that money, where are you going to get it? And how, as your success part, like when do you need it back? This is not, game companies are not a get-rich-quick scheme. They are not a get-rich-quick scheme. I mean, maybe if you had some amazing fluke, but in general, not a get-rich-quick scheme. So, money, how do you get it? And there's lots of ways. How much time can you realistically contribute to this? I know at lunch we were talking about this, about time and when do I have time to do this, or game design and things like this session. Because that's going to drive how quickly the company can grow. And to a certain extent, it also, even if you have success, back to how do you define success? Like running a Kickstarter campaign is a lot of work. And so either you have to have the time to do it or you have to be willing to pay someone else to do it. And nobody worth their salt is going to do it for free. It will cost you to have someone help you run a Kickstarter. How much time? Oops, why is this not going down? Hold on. Oops, suspicious connection blocked. Who's trying to get on my computer out there?
Okay, suspicious worry.
Okay. And then I said, when do you need to turn a profit and how much? This is not going to be your way of making a living right away. Okay, so do you need it to make a profit? How much of a profit? So this is now me stepping away from game design and into my day job, if you will, is I do financial consulting with small business. So when do you need to turn a profit? How much? And this is one I think a lot of game designers struggle with is, are you willing to go out and market games? And I don't just mean online. I mean, are you willing to stand in front of a group? Are you willing to go to a convention and talk to people as they walk past you? Are you willing to proactively reach out to podcasts? So for example, with Dave and his game, I'm the one booking the podcast stuff. He's like, I'll show up, but as the publisher, my job is to get him the spots. My job is to go out and talk him up. and basically be his cheerleader. Like, yay, have you seen this game? It's so cool. I know a lot of game designers don't want to do that. As you may have guessed, I'm an extrovert. So I'm happy to do it. However, I know a lot of people aren't. That is your job. And so unless you can pay someone else to do that piece, when you become a publisher, you become a marketer, period. Okay. Questions to ask yourself. Oh, we already did that. Challenges to expect. Sorry, I've got two weird. Oh, there's two screens on here and it's very confusing. How do you handle uncertainty? Because there's a lot of uncertainty. And how do you handle it when things go sideways? Because things will go wrong. Things will absolutely go wrong. I've talked to a lot of people about their experience with like running Kickstarting, and because that's the most common way people who don't have a huge budget get the money to do a good print run. I have yet to talk to someone who didn't have a problem during the Kickstarter. How are you going to handle that? Are you comfortable handling that? If you're someone that doesn't deal well with that, it may not be a good idea to be a publisher. Because the buck stops at you, right? You got to figure it out. Any questions or thoughts about questions to ask yourself? No? Okay. Challenges to expect. This first one we already hit on. You are the chief marketing officer, the chief financial officer, the chief operations officer, the chief everything when you start. And if you're not comfortable doing those things, either get a partner, which is fine, go into business with somebody else. More legal fees though, because you have to have a partnership agreement. Get a partner, or plan a budget that includes paying someone to do some of this. Because someone has to do the marketing. Someone has to know the numbers. I cannot overstate the importance of fully understanding the financial impact of your price. I have seen so many businesses, because I told you my day job is finance. So many small businesses don't understand all the costs that really go into something, and so they sell it, they end up creating a product they're selling at a loss. And you cannot grow your way out of that. You can't. And you don't want to start something and then be like, oh, I can't sustain this. A common thing I hear people say, and I'm drinking water, so this is perfect. A common thing I hear people say, like in the book world, because I do a lot with publishers, like book publishers, art writers, is they'll say, I can't charge that much for this book. Right? I mean, you've heard that. I can't charge this much for the game. Now, okay, there's extremes. No, you cannot charge $300 for a deck of cards that has 10 cards in it. No. However, there is a lot you can charge for because of water. So I'm 99% sure that Game Crafter will not get a bill on their statement, will not have on their statement, we served you 30 carafes of water and that will be X dollars. It's probably not on there, right? Yes?
Magic the Gathering will sell a deck of 10 cards for $3.
Okay, I just spit water all over the place. Sorry. Yes, okay, so that's actually great. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. That's perfect. Thank you. You get a gold star because it ties in perfectly with the tail end of my little water talk. I'm so sorry for whoever's going next. Is that you, Alicia? It's Marson, I think. That this is, in essence, free or pennies. At least in the US, we're very fortunate to have that situation. However, you still can go to the store. I'll go to Target and buy like the generic 24-pack of bottled water. Why? Because it's easy if you're on the go. I have a kid who does dance and karate, and she gets thirsty a lot, so I'll grab that. I mean, I have the filter water bottles, but she always forgets them. So that's maybe like, what, a couple dollars for a 24-pack? Okay, it's still something you can get free, right? Now you take it to the next point. How many of you have been like driving somewhere and you stop at the gas station and you buy a single bottle of water that's cold for like $2 or $3? We've all done it at some point. Because now there's a need, right? And we perceive it as a need at least, and we do it. There's a brand of water called Bling H2O. I kid you not. They've been in business over a decade. You can look them up online. And they charge $50 and up for a single bottle of water. And they're still, the 10 years they've been in business, 10 years. Single bottle of water. You can look them up, Bling H2O. And it's some of it is they have fancy bottles, but they have some Swarovski crystals on them. So what? Those aren't expensive. It's marketing because people perceive it a certain way. They perceive the worth. Like, ooh, cool people have Bling H2O, right? The most expensive bottle of water, and then I'm going to talk about magic. We're coming full circle. The most expensive bottle of water, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, was like $70,000. $70,000 for a single bottle of water. Now, it was supposedly some art bottle, but it literally only had water in it. And now I've been told you can sell 10 cards for $300 if you're Magic the Gathering. It's marketing. So don't be afraid to charge what you need to earn a profit. I'm not saying be crazy, but what you want to do, and this gets back to why you want the emotional connection, because if you have an emotional connection, won't you spend more? If you feel invested, won't you spend more than just something random? And it all feeds together. It's all part of the cycle. Okay. Why is this? Okay. Death by 1,000 cuts. That was an actual form of torture and execution in China until it was outlawed in 1905, I believe. They would literally take people and start cutting them until they died or told them whatever they needed to know. And it was around 1,000 cuts when they kind of kicked the bucket. That's why it's called death by 1,000 cuts, which is rather morbid. However, this is really important because another thing I see small businesses forget about is all the little stuff. And it adds up until suddenly you've died because of all these little things, these expenses. You're like, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Think about it. Even if you had, let's say, $10 a week that you weren't accounting for, what happens at the end of the year? It's $500. What if it's $100 a week? That's $5,000. You know, things that seem small, they add up. And if you don't pay attention to that, you will die death by 1,000 cuts. And I have seen this over and over and over again. I cannot underemphasize understanding this. You must track all the numbers, and I know that sounds horribly tedious. But it's part of running a business. Especially in games, because, you know, oh, I bought some dice, or and I'm so guilty of this. At Origins, I bought some crazy expensive dice. Like, they had Scooby-Doo dice, where when it was on one, it said, ruh-roh. How could I not buy that, right? On a D20 for the one was a ruh-roh. Yeah, exactly. And I saw them and I'm like, oh. And then there were Star Wars dice. And okay, there was lots of cool dice. We've talked about logistics. It's another one I cannot overemphasize. How many of you have backed a Kickstarter in the last 6 months that have heard something about logistics? I mean, come on, we've all, yeah. Logistics is always going to be a challenge, even in the best of times. Capital. Where do you get it? And how much do you need? And I don't know how many of you are, if this is just, hey, it's a session, so I'm here, or if you're really thinking about it. If you're really thinking about it, there are different ways to get capital to fund your business. I gotta take a drink of water. There's actually crowdfunding now you can do to start businesses. You can obviously ask friends and family. You can take a loan out against your 401k. I don't know if you knew that. So you can take a loan on it. And I'm not advocating I am not being a financial advisor. I am not advocating any of these strategies. Okay, I'm simply telling you there are options. But it will take money. And last but not least, you yourself can be a challenge. Because as much as I love doing it, there are moments when I think, what was I thinking? Or how am I going to make this happen? It can be overwhelming and intimidating at moments. So having a support system. I mentioned earlier I am in a board game design mastermind group. So they're like my support. And I talk to them as well as friends. And it's been worth it, as to your question. It has absolutely been worth it. However, you have to expect that it will not be all butterflies and rainbows and unicorns. I don't even know why that would be cool. I'd rather have the Grick and the dragons and spaceships personally, but so you guys have been really quiet. I'm done. Are there any questions? Yes.
What's the name of your company called?
Oh, Tesseray Games. It's named after my first games. It's not published yet because it needs a lot of work. It was my first game. Brenna Rain has a starship named Tesseray. So Tesseray Games.
So financial-wise, you had the example before where, let's say you sell X number of games,
Mhm.
and it totals out to like $30,000, and the designer gets $1,500 out of that. How much?
That's an example. I'm not saying you'll get that.
But like in that random example, if you're on the publisher side of things, how much can you expect to make profit-wise on numbers like that?
It's going to depend on a lot, and I don't mean that in a snarky way, because it depends on what you've had to invest into it. Because how much art are you putting into it to begin with? So it could be zero at 30,000. You know, if you had to put, let's say, 5,000 or 6,000 just into the art, and that's not a crazy number to say you're spending on art. You know, that you might at that first run just break even. What you should be, at least for me, my target long term is, in all my business ventures, I always try to do pre-tax, so before any income tax paid by the company or me, I always try to go for 10% profit margin, because you're never going to hit it. There's always going to be something that happens, so it'll be lower. And remember, you're paying taxes on that. So, you know, 5 to 7% after all that I actually take home, I think is reasonable. So you can see why you can't live off a game company until you get to a certain size. Which reminds me, one other thing that came up when we were talking about designers, and it's something different. My lawyer actually encouraged it, was I have an out for my designers different than the usual one. And I did this because in the book publishing world, I know people who used to do books they had published through, okay, whether or not you read romance novels, it's not like a thing I'm into, but it's big business in the book world. Okay, it is big business. And I have a friend that's published over 60 books with, you know, romance books. Like, she makes a living doing it. And she had a couple with Harlequin, and from years ago. And she wanted to get the books back because they weren't doing anything with it. So what they would do, this is so sleazy, what they would do is they would print it in some random country, but it kept it in print. So she couldn't get the rights back. That's something to be aware of if you think you ever might want the rights back. By the way, I always do royalties. I don't want to buy your outright. I'm paying royalties. It reverts to you. So I have a time frame in my contracts that I have the exclusive right to do this for X number of years. At the end of that period, so I've figured out as a financial person, what do I need to do to break even and earn the return I want in that period? And at that time, if I've done a good job for my designer and for the game, they'll stay with me because I'm making it worth their time. If I haven't, they can go somewhere else. And they know it's a definitive date that happens on, because I've seen how people can play games, and I don't want to fall into that or have someone think I might do it. But I don't know of any other, and I'm not saying it hasn't happened elsewhere, I just don't know if anyone else has ever done that in games. Yes?
My publishing contract does that.
Does it?
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask who that's with?
Pericles Games?
Okay. So there you go. At least 2 of us are there. I would encourage you to try to get that, because then you have a definitive date, and as a designer, some of the power comes back to you. And I see Jamie looking at his watch. Any other questions or ideas, thoughts, jokes? Yes.
What if, like, a designer or an artist comes back to you with an unexpected question? How do you usually handle that?
An unexpected. Okay, can you give me? Do you have an?
I don't have an example. It's just like whenever you're caught off guard as a
Oh,
publisher.
okay. Okay, so, well, besides I have an idea and I want to sell it to you. I mean, I was just like, what? I think the biggest one that surprised me was that people who had spent a lot of time designing a game and had been active in the board game design community really didn't know what they could expect from a royalty arrangement. And that I had to give them the news that this wasn't such a great, they weren't going to make what they thought they were going to make initially. Because I figured, well, they were professionals, they're well-spoken, they've been doing all this stuff, but yet they still didn't have that piece of the puzzle. That surprised me.
I think what I meant was like, what a situation where you don't have the answer. And like, how do you approach that and be like, okay, let's figure out an answer, something like that.
Yep. Well, first of all, yeah, I'm always honest about it. If I don't know, I just say, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to lie about it. I don't know. And I would generally offer either, I don't know and it's not worth my time to figure out. I mean, it depends on the question. Or, I don't know and this is my game plan to get an answer. Do you have any additional thoughts? But I'm a connector. Like when we talked about in the session where I talked about the tipping point. I am a connector. I like to connect people. I like to be connected. So if I don't have the answer, generally, I have an idea of who I can go to get the direction of where to get the answer. So is that more what you're looking for? People who always know the answer sometimes make me nervous because no one has all the answers. I'd much rather be involved working with someone who says, oh yeah, I don't know that. Other questions? Nope. Okay. Go forth and either start a company or not, but do it with well thought out, okay?